This is the Instigators, presented by Seneca Resorts and Casinos. Nothing else comes close.
We are going to overtime.
Welcome into this week's podcast. Marty, we're taking it into a, same venue, but different sport, sticking with lacrosse this go around. And I have to wonder if you were mildly slighted when appearing on TSN for trade deadline that you were not asked to 10 goal in that segment that was ultimately filled by Gino Reda manning a hockey net in lacrosse goalie gear.
Yeah, well, I think the question was asked to the group who would be willing to jump in net as the lacrosse goalie, and I got there too late. I said yes, but obviously Gino Reda, who has done many crazy things on trade deadline and free agent frenzy, he chased llamas all over the parking lot the one year, so this had nothing compared to it, but Gino was really excited to go, although I'll tell you this, the goalie equipment for lacrosse, box lacrosse.
It's a little big.
I never seen it live and up close and personal. It is huge.
Yeah.
I want it. I want some of that, let me tell you.
The first, not that I didn't notice this as a kid, but it, of course, progressively grew over time. And I remember being at a Man Cup Championship, which is the Canadian Senior Lacrosse Championship, and the goaltender, who also played pro, of course, was coming down the hallway to go between the doors to get out onto the floor, and literally had to turn sideways to go through, and you're like, okay, there's a clear sign just how big these guys are. And we're talking today to an all-timer when it comes to goaltending, and that's why we lead off the show this way. Steve Dietrich's coming up. He's the Bandits GM, and I have to think that through your time in this market, us working together, your kids, the excitement they get out of live sporting events, you have a pretty good understanding now of what Buffalo Bandits lacrosse means in this community.
Absolutely. I've been to a bunch of lacrosse game here in Buffalo and also in Rochester with the Nighthawks in the late 90s when I was playing with the Rochester Americans, and that's where Steve Dietrich was when I was with the Amerks and then made his way over to the Bandits, and I used to love watching him play goal. We have a small connection to some junior hockey and a friend of his, and we'll hopefully get a chance to discuss that in the podcast as well. So, yeah, I absolutely enjoy live sporting events. And lacrosse is at the top. Well, maybe not number one because obviously I'm a hockey guy, but is one of the top events that I want to go to because it's different. There's always action. And, this is definitely a good sport for people to experience.
Bandits coming off the bye week. It's fitting that we're doing our intro to this podcast in this building because when it opened up, Steve Dietrich was a member of the Rochester Nighthawks and earned championship game MVP honors with Rochester against Buffalo in the spring of 1997. And folks, when you're serious about the game, bet on Buffalo at the only sports books in Western New York. Seneca Resorts and Casinos betting counters are open daily, and self-service betting kiosks are available 24/7 at all three locations. Whether you visit Seneca Niagara, Allegheny, or Buffalo Creek, the Sports Lounge features the latest lines and multiple screens so you never miss a play. The sports books at Seneca Resorts and Casinos, where the love of the game meets the thrill of the win. Bandits GM Steve Dietrich. Steve, I'm sure you're anxious to have the Bandits back in action this week after the bye, and boy, your team has looked so good, almost start to finish so far. Now you've gone through the trade deadline. How do you feel about the entire group?
Duffer, it's been one of those magical seasons so far that everything seemed to have gone our way. Gone through the easy part of our schedule so far, I guess if you could say easy. Tough, 8 days coming up with 2 Halifax and then a Philly and a Colorado. So it's going to be tough, but I think we're okay here. I think we're lined up. We're fairly healthy, so we're looking forward to Halifax this weekend for sure.
So Bandit Nation, over 12,000 fans at home. The last game you guys played at KeyBank Center, but you've also experienced going into playing the Toronto Rock with no fans. How does it feel with the atmosphere at home? And is that something that you guys feel fortunate to have compared to some of the other teams around the league?
Oh, Marty, it's second to none. Bandit Land is the best. I was able to have the pleasure of playing there for a long time, and I got to be on the floor and feel that. And now behind the bench, it's just terrific. And we have fans that follow us to Rochester and they follow us to Albany. It's great. And when when we were in Rochester, I think we almost had more fans in the building than Rochester did. So it makes us feel at home whenever we were on the road. But you're right, Toronto was a bit odd, not having anybody around and basically being able to hear everything. It was a bit different, more summer lacrosse, but yeah, Banditland is second to none.
Do you feel you're trending the right way from a crowd standpoint? And I know the numbers would say that, but do you feel like there's a potential, even amidst this still slightly uncertain time, to get this attendance number even that much closer to what it used to be in Banditland if we could see 14, 15, 16 before the end of this year?
Yeah, I think we're trending in the right direction. Yeah, you're right. I think there's still a little bit of hesitation with people with the vaccination and masks, and some people are scared about it. Some people didn't even care at the beginning. I think the border situation is still a little bit for the Canadian people. Like my dad and my wife and my daughter haven't been down yet. So I think if the border situations open up, I think we're creeping in the right way. You know, the people of Buffalo have always supported us, so I think more people will continue to come out. And I don't know if we'll ever get back to the 18,000 people that we used to have in the past, but if we can get to the mid-teens, you know, with how loud our crowd is, it just gives us such an advantage. And especially if we can get something like that this coming weekend with Halifax, knowing that we have to go there the next day and they'll have a full building, it'll make things that much more exciting.
So this had to be a challenge to put together this team, but I mean, you did an amazing job. So, you know, with the lack of traveling and being able to see other players and the up and comers and everything that you have to do in your job, do you rely on the players a lot? Talk to them about who is players that are standing out either in summer ball or whatever, you know, their experience throughout the year and what they play as, or is it mainly you and your group that really work hard to try to put together a roster that you know is going to be competitive?
You know what, Marty, I think we're in a unique situation that with lacrosse, it's such a tight knit circle that a lot of these guys that play, you know, together in the winter, maybe play against each other in the summer or vice versa. So I think you lean on the players a lot to get their feelings as to what are some guys like in the room, what are some of their strengths, what are some of their weaknesses. But again, I don't want to take away from our staff, you know, Rob Buchan out west, Troy Cordingley in the east. You know, I have the luxury of being a GM in the summer league, so I see a lot of these guys. So I think it's unique that we lean on the players, but also we do a lot of work and we get to see a lot of these guys. The only thing where we probably lack a little bit is watching the American college kids, because, you know, we like to practice midweek. So we want everybody to live around the market, where a lot of these college kids will live in New York or something like that. So we don't get to see those guys as much to basically feel them out if they would move. But I think we've done a good job with all the Canadian kids without a doubt.
But you have also done a pretty good job with American kids and integrating them onto the roster. And there seems to be this, you know, burgeoning relationship between, you mentioned the summer game, but you're referring to the summer indoor game in Canada for the most part. Whereas the PLL has produced some tremendous field lacrosse players, and I'm sure a lot of Bandits fans know this full well. The reigning champions, Chaos, house a number of Buffalo Bandits from the NLL. So what is that dynamic like? And are you still, after all these decades in the game, hopeful that the indoor and outdoor game can be a true partner moving forward?
Well, I think for us to move forward, I think we almost have to be. Like, there's no sense of basically competing with each other because we share a lot of the same players. If we could ever get to the point where our season stops or starts and finishes even a week before their season starts, so that these guys can almost be year-round athletes, I think that would be best for lacrosse. Just to take it one step back, when you mentioned the Chaos, we're lucky enough that most of our offense is basically the offense for the Chaos. So these guys are together, you know, 10, 11 months of the year, practicing, have sticks in their hands. So that's a big benefit for us. They all live together in Buffalo. So that's great. And the big thing for us is they had a taste of winning. You know, I'm sure Marty can attest, once you taste it, you want more and more. But the first thing is it's hard to get it the first time. They've done that. And hopefully that now translates into helping us achieve the ultimate goal.
Well, winning also makes you a very favorable or exciting destination. And I would think that the Bandits in Buffalo is one of those destinations for players to want to come to. So what has been the response? Like when you call people up, Do they seem hesitant because you said we like players to live around the area so we can have a midweek practice, or is it very encouraging? Like everybody wants to come and play for the Bandits where you have your pick of the players?
Yeah, I think Toronto and Buffalo, definitely in the East, are the premier destinations. A lot of our guys are from Southern Ontario, so practicing midweek's not a big deal for us. And the guys that are from the West have moved to Buffalo. So the organization has treated these guys really, really well to make sure that they've acclimatized themselves to the area so that they can gel as a team. So with Toronto and Buffalo as the premier destinations, I can't see why we can't continue to attract free agents. But then again, as long as we continue to draft well, you want to augment yourself with free agents. You don't ever want to have to try and build your team with free agents. So we've done a pretty good job of that as well.
What was this past trade deadline like for you, given your record sitting there at 10-1? I mean, were you really, really, really anxious to do something, or were you more like, nah, I'm good here?
You know what? You're almost caught between a rock and a hard place, because I went into this thinking if we're going to do something, I wanted it to be a difference maker. So that, and obviously I didn't want to touch our offense. It would be a defenseman that would have been a difference maker. And we had our eyes on a couple. They didn't end up moving. But I didn't want to just shuffle the deck chairs. I think we wanted to give this group the chance to see this thing through. If we can augment it with a difference maker on the DN, we would have done that. It didn't come to fruition, but we have full confidence in the group that we have, and we put a pretty good record together to try and see this thing through. Now, like I mentioned earlier, the tough part of our schedule is coming up, so we're going to have to make hay here. But I like the depth. I like the guys that are on our practice roster. I think they can step in and play. And knowing that everything would have trickled down. So if you bring in one or two guys, that means one or two guys would have to go to the practice roster, and then you'd have to release two guys. And unless it was going to be a difference maker, we didn't want to do that.
So I want to tap into your former player or former goalie that you are. In hockey, they used to say like goalies make good TV analysts because they watch the game from a different perspective. But we're not so good at coaching because we've never really experienced the dynamic on the bench and the line changing and the matching of it and all that. So, but in lacrosse, like for you being a former goalie, how does that bring in some strength to your job as a general manager? And how do you see the game different than maybe somebody else would not see it the same way?
Well, you made the point of, as a goalie, I see everything, right? When you're sitting back there, you see everything, whether it's offense or defense, develop in front of you. So you can basically put a good plan in place. I also had the luxury when I played in Buffalo to have a guy by the name of Kurt Silcott. He was our GM. He took me under his wing. So I was involved in how he made decisions. So I learned from pretty good people. And when you have the best goaltender that's ever strapped on the pads as your goalie, it makes you a smarter GM, and it definitely makes you a smarter assistant coach. And I'm sure JT can tell you he makes him a smarter head coach. So, we have the luxury of having Matt, and we'll continue to move forward that way.
You at your best, Matt Vince at his best. How did you compare? Yeah, I mean, you're still the only one that's won MVP as a goalie.
Listen, Duffer, I always said Bobby Watson was the best goalie I ever saw. I put Matt Vince on that pedestal. I'd like to think I'm in the next tier with the Dallas Eliaks and the Pat O'Tooles and the Anthony Cosmos, but those two guys are on a different level.
Hey, was your shoulder? Were your shoulders as wide as Dallas's?
But I could tell you stories. Dallas had so many little nuances. He had fishnet between his pants. He had fishnets in between his arms. Like, yeah, no, man. If it hurt, I just put another pad there. That's how I did it. Whenever something hurt, I just strapped another pad onto it the next week.
If you're not cheating, you're not trying, right? I mean, that's the way goalies used to think. Now, let me ask you this: like in the NHL, we have like our equipment has to go to the league before it comes to us now, and it has to be approved. They take pictures. They really follow. Do the goalies in lacrosse have to do the same thing? Are they subject to the same scrutiny now where maybe 15, 20 years ago they weren't?
Yeah, 20 years ago when I played, Marty, we definitely weren't. The guys played with the rules as much as possible. But yeah, now they get the shin pads, the upper bodies, the pants. It's all sent by the league. It's all basically tailored to your size. And then every, pregame and during the game, they're measured by the referees. So yeah, there's no more cheating anymore, I guess you could say. I think Anthony Cosmo was the best I've ever seen at trying to cheat or bend the rules, I guess you could say. So he had some different things, but it's so hard to do now because they monitor the goalies so much.
without having, and I've watched an actual ton this year, Steve, is Hartley in Rochester? Is he this like smallest? If you took all the equipment off the guys, is he the smallest goalie in the league?
Yeah, he's tiny.
Yeah.
He's tiny, but he's fast. He reminds me of Dallas Eliak.
Yeah.
He is just lightning fast. Like Dallas was never a big guy, but he was just so fast.
Mm-hmm.
I look at guys like Warren Hill and Doug Jamieson. That's more my style, like a bigger guy that just blocked the net. What Rylan Hartley does, that's pretty to watch. It really is.
He's got a little hockey. He's got a little hockey goalie in him, Marty.
He's got a little everything.
Yeah.
He flops around the net. Yeah, he's got a little bit of everything.
Little goalie, a little catcher in baseball, a little of everything that you want. So now, Steve, you and I knew of you back in the mid-90s, and it's funny you brought that up right before we started the interview. Paul Chance is a guy I played with in juniors, and so I played with him in 95, 96, I believe. So you had to be in Rochester by then. And I was drafted by Buffalo, so he used to say, "Oh, I got my buddy is a goalie with the Nighthawks. A goalie with the Nighthawks." So how was that experience, like going from Rochester and then Buffalo? Because I remember going to the Nighthawks game and they were nuts. Like in the mid to late 90s, they were crazy in Rochester. But then you moved on to Buffalo. And I mean, did you get booed? Did you get yelled at? How was that when you went back to Rochester?
You know what? It was so funny. And it's sad. It's sad now to look at Rochester and not see that building be full because when I was lucky enough to play there, we were selling out. Now the building was a little smaller back then, but we were selling out. And it was great. And anytime Buffalo and Rochester played, the fans traveled. It was tremendous. And it was so funny. I thought I was a fan favorite in Rochester. I was there for 5 or 6 years. I got traded to Buffalo. First introduction for Buffalo, I got the clap. And then as soon as the game started, it was just riled with boos. So it was like, okay, here it is. Good. Thanks for being here, but now you're gone. But that's what makes Rochester Buffalo fans special, right? Like we'll acknowledge who you were, but you're not one of us anymore. So now you're the enemy.
Marty, if you didn't know this, when the building opened across the street and Steve was still with Rochester, the first championship game here in the building had Rochester and Buffalo, and Steve was able to walk away with MVP honors for the Nighthawks in the playoff championship. I was second row from the top in the building, and of course rooting on the Bandits. And that was one one for Rochester amidst what would ultimately be many much later on the back of Matt Vince, right, Steve? I mean, what a run he had there.
Yeah, again, we could talk about Matt Vince for an hour if you want, but yeah, he won I think 3 in a row. He got traded for John Grant. Like John Grant's one of the best that's ever played the game. He gets traded for John Grant. A lot of people question, what is Rochester thinking? You're trading the franchise icon and you're bringing a goalie. We already have a goalie in Pat O'Toole. Like, what are you doing? Mm-hmm. And then he goes on this run and he's won 7 goalies of the year. Yeah, he's phenomenal.
Okay, so what was your call? Because you just mentioned Pat O'Toole. I remember going to games and they would say, "What time is it?" Tool time. Like, was there a special call for you when you made saves that the crowd just got into it?
No, nothing at all. Like, people would they'd show pictures of cheeseburgers. Maybe that'd be about the extent of it, but no, there was nothing and no calls for me at all. I guess Dietrich's got no big name. I guess the German name, nothing to go with it.
Unbelievable. What do you make of how Banditland still reacts to just about everything Swinney says as a PA announcer? He's so good, isn't he?
You know what? I've talked to fans. I've talked to people from Kitchener, obviously seeing different fans around Ontario, and they always talk about either wanting to experience Banditland or how amazing Banditland is. And your announcer is one of the first things that always come out of their mouths. And you know what? Swinney's so humble, and we've said it to him many times, how he basically just enhances the product on the floor. And I fully believe that a lot of people come to our games because of what he brings to it, but he's second to none. Like I know for a fact that when there's been expansion teams, they've had Swinney try and coach some of these announcers as to how to get the fans going. He's second to none. Like there's nobody even close. And that's not to disrespect anybody else that does that job. Yeah, Swinney's on. He's like Matt. He's the Matt Vince, I guess, of in-game announcers. He's on a pier all by himself.
So as the GM, is there ever a time in the game that you hear something, you're like, "Oh, this is good. I got to let him know." And, "Oh, I don't know about this one. Maybe I should go over to the PA announcer booth and say, we got to cool it down a little bit. Is there ever a time where you get a little worried, or do they have to run it by you sometimes when they have new ideas?
No, Swinney's great. Swinney's on his own little platform. He's fantastic. But I have heard some stuff in Calgary. They've mocked people, and it's like, oh, bud, like, I don't know what you're saying there. And I think the guy in Colorado actually lost his job because he was mocking a guy in the penalty box. So some guys can go a little far. Swinney knows the line. He's got a perfect line. He gets the crowd going, but he doesn't disrespect players. Some of the other guys try and disrespect the players.
We are far enough in now, we can definitely ask, where did you get the nickname Chugger?
Guys, it's no special story. Like, Marty wants to know what I used to get chanted. There's no such special story. I was a large kid as a youngin', and I went out to basically with my wooden stick. I was going to play out, no goalie. The coach looks around the room. Let's put the chubbiest kid. I'll say it nicely. Let's put the chubbiest kid in net. So I went in net, but then I wanted to always come out and hit people because I was a defenseman in hockey. So the chug like a train, because I always wanted to come out and hit people. Yeah, that's the boring story. Everybody thinks I was a booming drinker and I chugged pitchers of beer and stuff like that, but it was never any of that. It's a plain Jane story when I was a little kid.
So you did play hockey. How was the transition, I guess, from being a player or a defenseman, as you pointed out, and how long did you play? And when did you said, you know what, lacrosse is going to be more my speed?
Yeah, you know what? I got up to junior C, which isn't tremendously high level, but I enjoyed hockey because as a goalie, Marty, like you reflect or basically are involved in every play, right? Yeah. Like whether you guys are going to win or lose, it's the goalie. Every time they shoot on you, the goalie's the last line of defense. With a defenseman in hockey, if you screw up, well, we got Marty behind us. He's going to bail me out anyways. So with a lot less pressure as a defenseman in hockey. As a goalie, man, I loved it because you were it. Right? If you had a good game, your team was going to win. If you had a bad team, your team was going to lose. And I liked that pressure. And I'm sure you did too, to play. Yeah. But that big difference. I enjoyed hockey, but lacrosse was my passion.
Do you ever score a goal? Sorry, Duffer. I just wanted to keep, but not in hockey, because now I'm mixing hockey and lacrosse. And there was a goalie goal in San Diego in the AHL just a couple of weeks back. There was a goalie goal in lacrosse the other day. So, I was surprised. Like I don't think there's been that many goalie goals in lacrosse, and I would have thought that there would be maybe more. So did you ever try or got a chance to maybe put one in the net?
You know what? I never did. I always thought, and rightly or wrongly, however you want to look at it, I always thought it was disrespectful if I'm throwing the ball down at the empty net. It's almost like trying to rub salt in the wounds of the guys you're playing against. So I never did. I got to play out a couple times in junior. So I did score. I had nice hands. Again, chubby little kid, had nice hands. I scored 5 goals in junior. But that was as an out player.